Well, I've already told you how happy we are to be back here with each and every one of you today. Thank you for being here. Thank you for being a part of our journey, a part of our life. And thank you to each one who dedicated their consistent, devoted energy, time, and love to the center to keep it going while we were on sabbatical. Thank you. You know who you are, and we probably don't know everything that everyone has done to keep it clean and keep it moving. So thank you. Thank you very much. So I'm wondering if anyone can guess what the message might be today. Anybody? Any thoughts?
I think Frank knows.
I got it.
Very good. You win the prize. And you talked about simplification, and Baby really talked about the joy and happiness of oneness, and that's really the message. But we have some other things to say about it too. But keep those ideas that they shared in mind, because they're powerful ideas, and they're what we really talk about and what every speaker in Science of Mind really is talking about in life. So our message is simplify, and you've used Holmes and you've used Emerson, and we might touch on that, but our talk today is basically a message from the writings and the teachings and the life of Henry David Thoreau. We've been reading extensively and researching and learning a lot about him because we went to Walden Pond. That adventure occurred because David wanted to go there, and I thought, well, we've walked around 100 ponds in our travels. I wonder why he wants to go to one more pond. Well, I'm glad that I found out, because it was an incredible experience to just be there. And for me, even when I walk out in the parking lot, I think to myself, I wonder if any Native Americans walked here before they put tar down and cut down all the trees. I love thinking about who might have been in that space where I am in this moment. And I know a lot of you do too, because you've shared a lot of your history and your family, it's that genealogy with us, and your day-to-day living with families. So I know we're onto something together with this. So if you haven't already, I invite you to consider and begin contemplating the question, what needs to simplify in my life? What in my life needs to simplify? Ideas that come to mind for me are thoughts. For me, that's a big one. It may be for you too. Sometimes those thoughts just keep coming and coming and coming, and they create an energy and an emotion in my body that doesn't feel good. So simplifying those thoughts, learning how, taking the time is valuable. What about activities? That can be a big one. Relationships. And another one I thought of, and I'm sure you've each got your own already by now, but another one I thought of as we've just returned and being retired now, I've decided to clean out some spaces in my home. I've decided to simplify the way that we live day to day. So what do you have to say about this?
So this talk is basically based on a quote that's a little bit longer. It is. Wait for Mark to pull it up for me. Bingo. Our life is frittered away by detail. Simplify, simplify, simplify. I say let your affairs be as 2 or 3 and not 100 or 1,000. Instead of 1,000,000, count half a dozen and keep your accounts on your thumbnail. That's simple, isn't it? Thoreau lived in a little cabin on the property of Walden Pond, and was it what, 10 by 12 feet? Something like that, 10 by 12 feet. And he really had to simplify and declutter, kind of, his life to be able to do that. And I thought, that cabin was about half the size of our camper when we were traveling around. And we had to simplify to be able to do that. The main purpose of Walden by Thoreau is to find the meaning of life. He set out to contemplate life and himself and define man's role in the world. What is this life all about, and what is our role in it, basically? He believed that modern society has become too focused on materialism and frivolous pursuits, which detract from the true essence of life. Now remember, he's talking about modern society, and this was in the 1800s. Imagine what he would think now, living in our society. Of course, everything is so much more simple now because we have the internet and all that kind of stuff. So,
Okay.
Thoreau's advice to simplify is a call to strip away the unnecessary and embrace a more minimalistic lifestyle. He basically proposes 3 ways to simplify your life. Number 1 is consider what you can do without. Thoreau believed in the virtue economy, rejecting materialism and practicing simplicity. It's similar to the Buddhist non-attachment idea, that the more we hold on to things, the more the things seem to hold on to us. And the more we seem to lose freedom by the stuff that we hold around us. Consider what you can do without. We've been actually cleaning out our house for, well, years now. And we find hidey holes and places in the garage and junk drawers and closets and stuff, and every time we clear them out, we come across another giveaway day, and we say, wow, we got some work to do here. And so we've been practicing that quite a bit. What can we do without? When is the last time I actually even used this thing, and why am I hanging on to it? It's like an anchor around my neck holding me back when I could free myself from that. Number 2 is manage your resources wisely. Like all of us, Thoreau had to choose how to best put to use the supplies and money that he had. And like I said, he lived in a small space. So how could he manage and use efficiently those things which he chose to keep and use with him? He had to decide what is truly necessary and essential and important in life. And sometimes that takes a lot of contemplation, doesn't it? And number 3, savor what you have. Remember that what we have comes from the one source, which is plenty. And so we don't really need to acquire more. We simply need to appreciate that which we already have. We recognize the abundance in this universe in which we live and have our being. Thoreau said, the price of anything is the amount of life you exchange for it. When it is time to die, let us not discover that we have never lived. The price of anything is the amount of life you exchange for it. Are you giving up life for those precious knickknacks that you have in your life? He says, in short, I'm convinced both by faith and experience that to maintain oneself on this earth is not a hardship, but a pastime. Ooh, do you ever feel like you have to work? Do you ever find that a hardship? Or is it a pastime that you're enjoying? Are you really enjoying life, or are you struggling yourself through it? Simplify. You don't have to struggle through it. He says the mass of men lead lives of quiet desperation. That's probably one of his most famous quotes. And I think it's important, the inference that he's making is that desperation is self-imposed. It doesn't come from life around us. It comes from ourselves deciding to live that way. Frank's quote by Ernest Holmes in the Sermon by the Sea was so relevant and so perfect. I thought, Frank, you must have been listening while we were working on our talk this week. Ernest Holmes says, if a man is seeking God, and if he happens to have the ability to think straight through, he will arrive at the inevitable conclusion that the discovery of God will have to come through the discovery of himself. This calls for an absolute unity between God and man, not a unity someday to be attained, but one that exists now, that existed before he found it out and would have existed just the same if he had never made the discovery. Thus we realize that man is immortal now, whether he knows it or not. And I believe that when we begin to discard the trappings and the things that are keeping us where we are, holding us in our place, we begin to actually realize the immortality, the bigness, the hugeness of life around us. I think that religion is often overly complicated. Have you ever noticed that? Have anybody here been in a religious experience? It seems like they have a lot of rules and regulations and strict standards and moral obligations, and they're usually not dependent on personal responsibility. They're dependent upon someone else taking care of us, and we feel like we have to please that deity so that it will take care of us and protect us and give us the things that we want in life. We expect that deity to come back at the end of times and to save the world. Most religious spiritual traditions believe that. For example, Christians have been waiting for Jesus to return for 2,000 years. Muslims have been waiting for the Messiah from the line of Muhammad for 1,300 years. Hindus have been waiting for Kali for 3,700 years. Buddhists have been waiting for Maitreya for 2,600 years. Jews have been waiting for the Messiah for 2,500 years. Sunnis have been waiting for the Prophet Isa for 1,400 years. Shiite Muslims have been waiting for Imam Mahdi for 1,100 years. Druids have been waiting for Hamza ibn Ali for 1,000 years. And Zoroastrians have been waiting for Shah Bahram for 3,500 years. Most religions embrace the idea of a savior who will come to unite the world and rid it of evil. Now, we've been out of the loop a little bit. We haven't been watching the news lately, but I don't think any of them have appeared in the last couple of months, have they? I'm not exactly sure that they will any time in the near future. So imagine if we took responsibility for creating a better world ourselves, rather than waiting for a supernatural deity to come to us and do it for us. What if we could simply recognize the divine presence is already here? Well, science of mind teaches us that we are one with the Creator in the here and now. We have the full power and presence of divinity immediately available to us. In fact, we are co-creators with God in our own reality. That makes our spiritual life and expectations remarkably simple. We don't have to work the system because we are one with the system. Ours is a very simple spirituality. God is all that is, and if God is all that is, God is all you are. You are one with all the power and presence of the universe. So war, disease, famine, poverty, ill health, yes, even politics are all illusions from the reality of perfection. We could start every Sunday service with maybe a song and then go into God is all that is. So God is all you are. So you are one with all the power and presence of the universe. And so it is. Let's eat turkey.
Today we will. Today we will do that.
I want another song.
Kant, Emerson, and Thoreau were all transcendentalists, and they advocated the idea of a personal knowledge of God, believing that no intermediary was required or needed for spiritual insight. They embraced idealism, focusing on nature and opposing materialism, because they recognized that materialism didn't really help us. It was that which was in us that actually brought us to our spiritual fullness. Immanuel Kant said, "Have the courage to use your own understanding." Ralph Waldo Emerson said, "Nothing is more simple than greatness. Indeed, to be simple is to be great." They all echoed beliefs from their earliest of times, such as Plotinus, who said, "Roused within myself and my body, outside everything else and inside myself, my gaze has met beauty, wondrous, and great." Obviously, he didn't need someone else to make him wonderful and great. He found it within himself. Lao Tzu says, "I have just three things to teach: simplicity, patience, compassion. These three are the greatest treasures." And Sir Isaac Newton says truth is ever to be found in simplicity and not in the multiplicity and confusion of things. So it is.
Yes, it is. Well, I agree with all of the ideas that David took from Thoreau to help us to simplify. But I got different ones, different ideas as I was reading from what I took from his writings. And my ideas are two. One is reduce distractions. And we reduce distractions as we focused on what's important. And so the second one is self-reflection, taking time each and every day, sometimes more than once, to self-reflect on what is most important to you. So as you self-reflect and determine what is most important to you, you are then able to determine what distractions you need to reduce in your life, and then focus on the portion that is important to you, not the details all around it. So each one of us has a different story, different ideas in our lives, and I'd like to use a part or parts, and I want to be very clear that I'm only using parts of Henry David Thoreau's life that I've pulled out in order to make an example of how it sometimes works in our own lives, because we too sometimes get entangled and find ourselves in a sad situation. So Henry David Thoreau worked at his family's business. Their business was making pencils and grinding graphite. And he worked at that business. He had a lot of friends, he had family around, but at some point he became restless. And that's when he went out and built the home on Walden Pond in the woods that we got to see the replica of and the spot where it was. And we walked the entire way around the woods, assuming he probably did too. So he went there to be nurtured by nature. And I think that's invaluable, to be nurtured by nature. He went there to write, he journal wrote, he wrote his book Walden, he meditated. He went swimming, he walked among the trees. He was probably an early ecologist before they maybe even had that word, I'm not sure. But he enjoyed nature. He was exploring the desire to simplify. And that was when he was writing. He spent 2 years and 2 months in this home, and then he returned to town, to the community, to family. He became a surveyor in order to support himself, and then after a while he went back into the family business again. And when his father died, he took on the responsibility of running the family business. So at some point he became an activist more than a transcendentalist. Now David explained a transcendentalist believes in that oneness of life, like probably we're transcendentalists of some sort. We believe in that oneness of all life and nature. And so he moved more from that idea in the world into becoming an activist. And he was a great supporter and fan of John Brown, who became an important figure in his life. And he got involved in anti-slavery activities. Now, we each have our passion. We each have the activities that we are willing to step up to the plate for. Bless you. But do we engage in those activities to the point of losing the simplified life and the understanding of being nurtured by nature, by God, by life, realizing our oneness within it? Well, he got lost in it, in my opinion. when Brown's raid on Harper's Ferry failed and John Brown was hanged, it has been said that Thoreau suffered a psychic shock that eventually led to his death. He died at 44 years old. 44 years old. That is young. I have children almost that age. That is young. Now, he died of tuberculosis. And you may or may not agree with this little piece, but I always go, when I hear a diagnosis, to Louise Hay. And to be honest with you, I've never found her to be wrong. Even the times I resisted and said, oh no, that's not me, I've always found it to be right, and eventually I come back to it. So I went to see, what does she say about tuberculosis? Now, he's not even here to dispute this, although maybe he's rolling over in his grave, I don't know. But this is what it says. What she writes is a cause, wasting away from selfishness, possessive, cruel thoughts, revenge. Now, because I said all those yucky words, I'm now going to read the affirmation that she then gives, which she does with all of these. As I love and approve of myself, I create a joyful, peaceful world to live in. Now, I propose that that is what he did when he went to Walden Pond. I propose that when he was living in that place of simplified living, of knowing his oneness with all of life, and taking good care of himself, cleaning out the messes, letting go of them, that he lived a godly life, a healthy life. And when he got caught up in the trappings of the world, the thoughts that he had led to deterioration within his own body. That's something for us to really look at. For us to really take the time to reduce distractions so that we're focused on what's important to us personally, and take the time to self-reflect. Holmes writes in The Larger Life, he has a part that says, the riddle of simplicity. And he says, to return to a sane simplicity is one of the first and most important things to do. A sane simplicity. Well, of course, what he's talking about is that one nature of life that's diffused through all of life, and therefore out of necessity. It is you. You are already whole, complete, and perfect. As Frank said something like in the beginning, accept it, step into it, and live it. And in closing today, we have a presentation of pictures and videos from our walk around Walden Pond, and invite you to take a walk with Thoreau and us around Walden Pond.